Kia ora. The X-Men property seems to be returning into the mainstream cultural landscape more and more with each year in my eyes, and one of the most important inclusions for myself comes in the form of merchandising, especially within LEGO. Less than a year ago I was able to finally get Beast as a minifigure, this year I was able to get Rogue as a minifigure. I'm hoping that it's only now a matter of time until I can get my hands on an official LEGO X Mansion, and I got to thinking, what would my ideal LEGO X Mansion look like? So today I wanted to talk about the X Mansion for a bit. It's an idea that's been floating around from fans since around the beginning of the LEGO Marvel theme's existence in 2012, especially with the release of the Marvel Superheroes game that came out in 2013, with the X-Men being now folded into the main line of Disney universe of Marvel, and with more and more merchandising coverage of the famous team, it seems likely that eventually this could happen, and LEGO are probably looking into making a really cool modular build for the X Mansion. So I wanted to discuss what my ideal X Mansion would look like if I got to design it, price range that I would personally be paying for it, and the minifigures that I would include, the most exciting part. I did a similar video like this a year ago about what my ideal revival LEGO Lord of the Rings wave would be. Maybe it'll be something that I do every January or so. This is my ideal look for the build. I'm going to go classic mansion here with its architecture. I recently got my hands on the Lockwood Estate set from the Jurassic World line, which for me looks incredible as a placeholder temporary X-Mansion, besides the interior that fits Jurassic and not really X-Men. But the X-Men is the purpose that I will be intending when I display my estate set. I think the colours work really well here, besides the red roof, and the overall structure of the building looks good too, because from my perspective the buildings always appear to look like a museum and college that I see around here in good old NZ, so I think it all looks really well and it sells that design. The mansion is giant in the source material. A Blackbird jet is supposed to fit underneath the school in some of the source materials, but it never seems to stay the same consistent design, just that it definitely is at least 2 stories tall. I think 2 stories is pretty good, but the Lockwood Estate manages an insane 3 stories technically. But here's the other thing, I want this to act as a modular-like design. I want it to be fully enclosed, kind of like a dollhouse. This would obviously match the design of the Bugle, the Sanctum, and the Avengers Tower, and part of why I think sets like the Lockwood Estate get to be a bit taller and wider than others is because it's not going to be a fully enclosed building. So we can lose a 3rd story or so if it means that we get an enclosed house, but sometimes we are privileged enough to have something like a modular building that is 3 different levels and fully enclosed. We could see the 3rd floor maybe be a bit smaller, like an attic space, or possibly have a basement level, who knows. One of the absolute best design features that I've ever seen in LEGO comes to us in the form of the LEGO Ideas Home Alone house, which has a picture-perfect dollhouse functionality of being able to fully enclose, and features the ability to fully open the front walls that connect the build together so that we can actually have an exposed look inside. Ideally, we would get a Home Alone-like build that uses the aesthetic or colors of the Lockwood Estate. Now, as far as that interior goes, that's a little bit tricky. The best frame of reference we have for something like this is this immaculate ideas submission from way back in 2014 from user DarthKY, whose submission reached 10k votes, but it was not approved. And this was back in the day when LEGO would only have to pick the idea from like 4 total submissions. They also have a really amazing Batcave submission too. The image quality, it's a bit dire, apologies, but this was uploaded 10 years ago now. Their submission was huge, and the detailed description tells us what each room represented. Starting from the bottom left and moving through the floors, here we can see Cerebro, also conjoined with the Danger Room observation deck. We then have the Danger Room itself in the middle, and a situation or computer room off to the side. Above that, the 1st floor staircase starts on the left. We have the main lobby here and a laboratory / medical bay next to it. Upstairs, the staircase continues into the 2nd story staircase. We then have a classroom, and next to that a headmaster's office. The final floor here features the top story staircase. We have Storm's attic garden and a dormitory. I would say a good chunk of this is necessary for the interiors of my ideal X Mansion. You really want this to feature the same elements as, say, a really good Hogwarts. It's a school, but it's also a living space, so I want to see a mix of both worlds, but we do need to keep it small-ish so that that price isn't crazy. I mentioned Home Alone before because I think that should be the best inspiration for this, and from looking at the images, I can personally make out at least 6 individual rooms. So the challenge here is to see if I can make these 12 rooms fit into 6 spaces instead. We're going to see quite a lot of doubling up here, but I think we can make it work. First off, 3 rooms dedicated to the stairs. I love this thinking because LEGO usually have time and time again forgotten to acknowledge steps or elevator buildings, but that's also why I don't think they will be necessary for a build like this. If they could squeeze in something, that would be really great as well, some grand staircase for the middle, but for now, I'm gonna just remove the idea of staircases. And just like that, we're down to now only 9 rooms that we have to deal with. Now the first floor of the Home Alone house here looks to be a dining room and a living room area, so we'll use that as the main entranceway by the door, which can lead directly into a classroom on one side and maybe Professor X's office on the other. I've removed the ability of traveling upstairs for most of these mutants, so I'm trying to be wheelchair accessible here. For our next floor, the Home Alone house features a small bedroom, a communal walkway to the rooms, and a small bathroom. So I think that this here fits the idea of a dormitory on one side of the hallway, keeping that walkway area to match the communal space idea at the front entranceway, and then we can have a mid-bay or a science lab of some kind on the other side of the floor. The top story of the Home Alone house features the attic space. It's a very crammed in area here, but this is where I'm going to cheat just a little bit. The Home Alone house also includes a really cool back section, which features a kitchen and a basement. There's also a van out front as well. The extra house bit is a really nice compact area, and I do really love when modular type sets include vehicles because they're always really well detailed, but if we take the pieces away from those builds, we can use those parts for a bit more of a substantial attic space, which is great because that's exactly where we're going to squeeze in a danger room and Cerebro. Now ideally, these rooms wouldn't appear in an attic space, instead a basement type build. This would be where LEGO would have to kind of restructure the design a little bit, and ideally they would, but at the same time, as long as these were the rooms that were included in the set, it does work well for me. Which then leads me to the price point. That Home Alone house is priced at $300 USD, and there seems to be a pretty good amount of substantial stuff in there for that count. Other sets along those lines include the Museum Modular, Assembly Square. It's only $50 less than the Bugle, and it's $50 more than the Sanctum. In NZD, however, the Home Alone house is not priced at that. It's priced at 500 NZD, along with the other sets listed, the Museum Modular and the Assembly Square. Annoyingly, it's $160 less than the Bugle and $100 more than the Sanctum, so it's not as clean of a price as it is in the USD currency. But I think they can make a good mansion for that range. It's bigger than the Sanctum, but it's smaller than the Bugle, and I think that's what this needs to be in order to attract the most amount of people. The Avengers Tower did need to be a much bigger set than the Bugle and the Sanctum, but that price point is close to $1,000 NZD. It's way too much to ask on people. Now the figures are interesting. I don't think anyone's going to agree on the perfect roster. My biggest gripe with these amazing Marvel sets is the inconsistency with those figures. The Bugle is comics based, I love it. The Sanctum and the Tower are movies based. I'm not a big fan of that. LEGO have yet to make any sets based on any of the X-Men movies, but they have made sets now based on the animated TV show. Works well for me because the animated cartoons and comics are actually hand in hand when it comes to the character designs, so all of the figures here would be based on the animated iterations. And if we take a look at those other 3 Marvel D2C sets, we can see a few repeats. It looks as though repeats are the only way that these sets can be made. It's cheaper, more cost effective to just throw in the figures that are already out on shelves. So I'll come out and just repeat some of the releases that we already have for the X-Men figures. Now on the current market, there is one LEGO licensed set that is priced at 500 NZD that includes minifigures. That set is the Home Alone house. The next cheapest licensed set with minifigures is, funnily enough, the Sanctum Sanctorum at 400 NZD, 9 minifigures, 7 of which are exclusive. And then the next most expensive licensed LEGO set with minifigures is, interestingly, the Bugle at 570 NZD, and that gives us 25 minifigures, 19 of which are exclusive, which is a lot more than the 9 that we're getting from the Sanctum. Goodness. There's a lot of other sets priced in between those prices with tons of different varieties of minifigures, but those are unlicensed. It is important to note that because the licensing fee does change the cost of things. I'm going to ignore the piece count for these sets because it all just becomes really arbitrary with these numbers, and it's hypothetical anyway, so let's split the difference on this instead. Bear in mind as well that of those 7 exclusive minifigures from the Sanctum, 5 of them are remakes technically. If you spend the extra $170 to get to the Bugle's price point, then you now have 25 minifigures. We're sticking around the $500 NZD price tag, which is only $100 more than our Sanctum price point. I calculate that for every $22 we would spend to get to the Bugle's price point, we would earn a minifigure slot. So we would get 4.5 extra figures. We'll round that up to 5, just, you know, for fun. Our $500 set would include 14 minifigures total then, but I need to reuse some of those characters in order to get away with this roster. To save us the headache of trying to figure all this stuff out, I'm just going to reuse all of the minifigures that they have released for the X-Men so far in the year 2023 and 2024. The figures are Cyclops, Rogue, Magneto, Wolverine, Beast, and Storm. Cyclops, Magneto, and Rogue can appear exactly how they do. I'll be reusing Wolverine, Storm, and Beast from the Disney CMF series, but they have to appear slightly different to be counted as remakes of those figures. Plus, the Wolverine from the X-Jet is terrible. Now we have our repeats and our remakes. That leaves us with 8 exclusive character slots. Keeping it simple, this is my opportunity to get the people that I have desired the most ever since the potential existence of LEGO X-Men became a possibility. So, Professor X is an obvious must. I suspect that if we do get LEGO X-Men sets again after this X-Jet, Professor X is the most likely minifigure to be included in sets. I'm also going to pick Mystique because Magneto has been working alone for a long time now as far as the Brotherhood representation goes, and she's one of the most well-known villains I think in Marvel Comics. Speaking of villains, I would also include a Sabretooth, and that would round out my Brotherhood villains. There are plenty of other villains I would love to see featured in here, people like Pyro or Toad, but I think we start small and then build our way up because ultimately we need to fill out the hero roster as well. I'm also not going to be picking big figs, but if I was, you know that that's where Juggernaut would come in. The next heroes I think are pretty easy picks. Gambit, an iconic hero and a fan favorite, he needs to be seen here. Jubilee is an iconic hero and a fan favorite, she needs to be seen here. Nightcrawler, an iconic hero and a fan favorite, he too needs to be seen here. Jean Grey, final iconic hero and fan favorite, and that rounds out my necessary people, at least in my books. If I had all those figures, I would be happy. There's one last spot, and it's kind of a tricky one. I'm torn between 3 choices. I really think it should be either Kitty Pryde, Angel, or Iceman, and ultimately, I'm leaning more towards Iceman because it would complete the collection of Spider-Man and his amazing friends, who LEGO were only able to half complete in the Daily Bugle set. They couldn't fully commit. So this is the golden opportunity to kind of finish off that little minifigure collection. That about does it. I've been thinking of an X-Mansion LEGO set for a decade now, and I wish I was skilled enough to build it myself and show you all my genius idea, but I think I should leave that to the professionals. What would you do differently if you had your say on how a LEGO X-Mansion should look? You should let me know down in the comments below. Subscribing helps to support this channel continue making videos like this. Also, while you're at it, be sure to like the video. Ka kite anō, thank you very much.